All right, welcome back. Gosh, here we are, two longtime friends, colleagues, people who are innovating in this space of talent management and employee experience and all this good stuff. I mean, Patrick Riley, Dan Riley, thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining us here in the community, and thank you for your contributions. I mean, you're both founders of Modern Survey. You've had a long journey to filmmaker to influencer. I mean, I look at our relationship over the years and I can't help but smile. You've been an inspiration to me, and now that you're kind of back in the mix, so to speak, with Radicl, look forward to hearing what you have in store in this discussion, and beyond. So if you would please introduce yourselves and what you're going to talk about today. Patrick, how about we start with you?
Sounds great. Al, thanks for having us back again. Hopefully we can have some great content today and a great conversation. And thanks for being a great friend and a supporter through the years as well. You've been there at some important times for us through the many years. So my name is Patrick Riley. I'm the co-founder of Radicl. Al, as you mentioned, I've been working in the employee engagement and talent management space for close to 2 decades. And what Dan and I are going to chat about today is this idea of how do we create unity in work. And we're going to come at this from a few different angles, a few different frames, have a conversation, and we hope that this delivers some really good ideas to the larger community.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will. And Dan, as you introduce yourself, I forgot, beyond filmmaker, you're a musician as well. So,
Yes.
we can't forget that. So
that's right. Yeah. Well, thanks, Al. Again, so I'm Dan Riley, Pat's brother, if it's not obvious already. Co-founder of Radicl, and yeah, honored to be speaking at PAFOW again, Al. I mean, I love this community, love the passion and the ideas that come from it. As we all know, it takes all of us to make real change. So, love being back here again, and again to just quickly reiterate who we are at Radicl. We hang our hats on one simple fact: we believe inspired change is possible, and this requires, in our name, radical thinking and radical change as organizations reassess their place in a changing world. So excited to talk about unity in work today.
Yeah, I again celebrate you all, not only because we've have a long-standing relationship, but I couldn't agree more. I mean, the need for disruptive innovation rooted in innovative thinking is necessary. And maybe to kick off question, and then I'll let you all, do your thing, is simply creating the space to explore what's possible and then design means in which to achieve that ideal future state. I find so many organizations just haven't created that space. So anyway, if we don't address it straight away, I'm sure we'll address it in the Q&A in a bit. So with that, I'm going to disappear and I'll join you in a bit. So enjoy.
Thanks, Al.
Yeah.
So, well, let me just kick off here. And I love that question that Al just posed, and I think we are going to address that throughout the next 40 minutes. So as I mentioned, we've been speaking at PAFOW for a while now at different conferences, and it used to be in person and now obviously virtual. But last November, the global conference, I started off that presentation with this statement. I said, the world needs our attention and care more than ever. So I'm going to double down on this, and I'm going to tweak it a bit now for January 2021. The world needs our attention, our love, and our care more than ever. It requires our unity. So this is what we're going to talk about today. And a common theme you're going to hear Pat and I repeating over and over again is the world has changed, period. The world has changed and work has changed, period. And the rate of change will continue exponentially, right? Things are not slowing down. So the character of who we are as people, as a society, and the character of our organizations, like, this is in our hands. It's up to us. So again, the world needs our care, our attention, and our love. I am very optimistic, and those of you who know me know I'm always optimistic, but in this case, I'm especially optimistic because human beings have an incredible gift, and that is we have the ability to adapt, change, and course correct. So the power of the human will the power of determination, the power of people working together. This is how it's done. And we've certainly proved this over the last 10 months and what it takes and what people can do when they set their minds to it and work together. So when we talk about the world and work needing our care and our attention and our love, this is the responsibility of everyone, right? Nobody gets, I don't have to care today pass. Nobody. We can't do that. And we talk about culture as the collection and behaviors of small things we do consistently. And this is how change and movements happen. And I am extraordinarily confident, and I think Pat's going to agree with me on this, that a movement is on the rise and underway. So today we're going to talk about learnings from 2020, expectations for 2021, and the changes that are required of all of us to meet the moment and mobilize for the future. We're going to do this. We're going to interview each other. So brothers interviewing each other. That should be, it's a good rhyme. Maybe we should have called it that. We're really going to focus on 4 core themes and then get started. We're going to focus on the necessary prioritization of mental health and well-being, right? Mental health has to be front and center within organizations, and we'll talk more about this. Number 2, moving beyond traditional employee engagement and focusing on the whole person experience, meeting each person where they are. This requires new science. This requires new sources of data for insights. This requires a renewed focus on behavior awareness and modification. This requires an understanding of individuals, right, at the atomic level and in the proper context. Number 3, there's a new sheriff in town, we like to joke, and this sheriff's name is constant change mentality. We're not going back. We've left home. We've left for college. And organizations have to be comfortable with everything being different and constantly changing. And finally, we're going to talk about the importance of having a clear company vision and purpose that moves beyond all this polarity and cultural polarity that we're experiencing. And this has to drive unity. So, Pat, other thoughts before we dive in?
It's a great setup, Dan. And, building on what Al was talking about, I mean, not only do we have to take the time to build the space to have these conversations, we also need to recognize the importance of community as we go forward in doing this work. And certainly the platform that we're all involved with today in this conversation is a great example of that. And again, as we make our way through this conversation, we invite you to chime in at the end. We're going to save some time for some questions. But I just want to reiterate the fact that we've been through kind of a once-in-a-generation experience collectively, looking back on 2020. The way we work, how work feels to us now, regardless of whether you're working from home or you still need to go to a job and and health and safety is on the line for you every day. The blurring of lines between work and life have kind of fundamentally changed. And there's a real sustained cultural polarization. And we're going to, as the conversation unfolds, Dan and I are going to kind of land on that one toward the end. And it's this idea of kind of external factors that we need to contend with that are there above and beyond the work we're doing internally. So there's a lot of different dimensions and a lot of different angles. But what we hope that we can achieve through this conversation, the way Dan laid out through these kind of key talking points, is to move toward this idea of unity at work, idea of togetherness. And we hope we achieve that through this conversation. So Dan, I'd like to start out by asking you a question. You and I grew up thinking about employee engagement. We spent almost 20 years in that space. We built one of the biggest platforms in the industry. And employee engagement's really important. But as we talk about today, we feel that we really need to move beyond employee engagement. So many things have changed, how we think about work and workplace, how different kind of constructs and categories are really shifting and changing around us. So the science is going to have to shift and change quite a bit, and we'll be getting to that a little bit later. But let's start with engagement, and let's start with this as a way to sort of build the foundation for this conversation. So there's been some great reports coming out recently. You can mention some of them, but we've seen, not surprisingly, some changes in engagement as we move through last year. Talk a little bit about some of the kind of key insights that we're seeing across the different studies, and how should we be thinking about that, at least as a starting point for this conversation?
Yeah, it's a great foundational question, and let me first just say, and again, to reiterate what you just said, what motivates us and what engages us at work is changing. It's changing very rapidly, and we all know this. Traditional models have served us well. They've been decent litmus tests, but don't go deep enough. I can't reiterate enough the focus on the whole person experience and how critical that is going forward. But with that said, let's just set some context. If we purely look at more traditional engagement data that's out there, and the trends are what we might expect, right? And they're relatively accurate. I think they're showing kind of a classic inverse U-shaped curve. And some great reports have been put out by Concentric, Mild Stomp and Ground, Qualtrics, Gallup. And these reports and studies all tell a very similar story. So in 2020, we saw engagement rise and peak in second quarter, and then fall back down in Q3 and Q4, ultimately taking us back to engagement levels close to what we observed in Q1 pre-pandemic. And right now they're quite unstable at that. So to provide some general data, in Q1, we were from a standard global employee engagement index, we were around mid-60s. We spiked to about 75, 78%, depending on which study in Q2. And then in Q3, we started to fall and drop again back into the mid-60s. So all indicators show global engagement is still down. And history might indicate that we can hang on and start to slowly rise. But again, I can't repeat this enough. And Pat, like we've been saying, everything has changed, work has changed. We can't rely on these past trends of significant events that affect engagement levels. So the likelihood of continuing to see engagement levels drop is very, very real, especially amongst certain populations, Gen Z, younger workforce, women, service industry, frontline workers. So a reset is absolutely required.
So Dan, we spent a lot of time studying engagement about 12 years ago as we went through the last major crisis, which was the financial crisis and the Great Recession. And not surprisingly, the shape of engagement, both kind of leading up to it, and then the way we saw sort of a rallying of organizations, as things got challenging, organizations tend to come together, engagement tends to lift, and then we kind of see that classic change curve where we start to come down off of that, and there's sort of that slow rise back. The financial crisis was a period of time in history where it was kind of like it was a terrible thing that happened for everybody, but then it was decided kind of getting back to where we were, right, as a country. And I feel like this crisis we're going through now is, like you said, is different. We're not necessarily trying to recover back to, a normal that we're used to. Things are probably going to continue to be, forever changing. So how do we extrapolate from, that thesis, that notion, and again, kind of use history a little bit as a way to kind of guide us forward?
Yeah, great question. And so I think a starting point for that is to understand, why did engagement levels rapidly rise in 2020? So I kind of break this down into really four. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but really four categories. Number one, there was this incredible focus on connectedness, right? This we are all in this together mindset. In some ways, we all shared a common mission and purpose that lived beyond the individual, that lived above the organization, right? This was something bigger. This was something we all needed to do together to survive, to move forward. So this inspired and this engaged people, especially in organizations where leaders rose to the occasion. Number two, a real focus on agility. We've overused and I think improperly used the word agility for a long time. And we're going to talk about this layer, because I think agility is something that organizations did to react, and they did it really well, but it's also what we're paying for now because of increased stress levels and constantly always being on. So we're going to talk about that. Number three, focus on well-being and caring. And I always use the example, the question of how are you doing today started to mean something. If you were asking it, you cared about the response. If you were being asked that question, you actually gave an honest, an open, a transparent answer. So we really got to know each other a little bit more, and the concept of caring and well-being really started to increase. And finally, empathy and humility. Again, these were words. I think some companies have always focused on these well, and some leaders, I think, had these deep down in their DNA, but it became mandatory, and some leaders rose, many leaders rose, and the best leaders rose. So, so that's a starting point as far as why did it rise and why did it fall? So I kind of look at two key things: stress and uncertainty. So we were seeing longer working hours, and we still are. Let me be clear, we're not through this. In fact, we're just on the edge of this. Longer working hours, work pressure, home office realities, new technologies, right? For some people that was easy, for some that was very, very stressful. And these are more specifically to those employees who are working from home. Family, childcare, homeschooling, feelings of isolation. Right, over time, it was a novel concept at first, but then feeling isolated started to take its toll, and all these things took a toll on physical and mental health. So I guess just to wrap up this piece of this conversation, what do companies need to do? So we need to be absolutely certain we are putting and focusing on a people-first strategy. It just can't be lip service. We have to live and breathe this. We have to remember what worked when we saw engagement rise, which we just talked about. But this can't just be a reaction, right? It has to become the new norm in how we work. So our renewed focus must remain being focused on connectedness, right? Agility, and the concept of how we talked about well-being, caring, empathy, and humility. And these things can't flicker, right? These have to be always on and ingrained as a part of the organization or the organization's future self, right? And we'll sound like a broken record on this, but finally, to do all this well, we have to be focusing on the whole person. And I want to be clear when I say this. I'm not necessarily saying that it's an understanding that the whole person means a willingness to embrace, listen to, and realize all parts of the person and the humanity of it. So this is not a one-size approach. And so it's a time to face fears and uneasy moments and have tough conversations, right? Systemic change requires being uncomfortable and requires individuals and organizations to create a new focused mindset and shift. So a people first focus is definitely going to get an intense workout in the months and years ahead.
Yeah, and this is hard work, Dan. This is everything you just described. This is hard work, but this is a time of, and it's an exciting time too. And to build on what you're saying, again, we need to broaden this lens out as we think about the experience employees are having. We need to rethink the science, and that's really important. Yeah. And we're just at the beginning of that. I mean, we have an opinion on this. We're talking to our clients, giving them new ways to think about this strategy. But this is new science because thinking of the dynamics of how work is happening and where it manifests is different. And then what do you do with the insights from that? And there are skills that need to be learned at the leadership level, at the manager level, at the individual contributor level. But if we do all this right, we are bringing value to the individual or helping them have better careers. And then we're helping leaders and managers navigate towards company goals, et cetera. So it's hard work.
It is hard, yeah.
But we need to tangle with this now. And as Al said earlier, we've got to build this space to do this work now.
Yeah, it's non-negotiable, as they say. So I mean, Pat, to that point, I mean, one thing that's changed and changing is the impact of working from home. So the question for you, over the last 10 months, we've seen this shift, right? Literally overnight, about half the U.S. workforce started to work from home. So this is really a kind of a two-part question. Number one, what should we be focused on in 2021 for our people strategies to be sure people can do their best work? And number two, more at the team level, how do we enable teams to continue to connect and collaborate and high perform? We know how important that connectedness is and that ability to collaborate and see each other. So curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge initiative, and we're learning a lot in real time as we go. There's a reason why employee experience has become such a popular category because inside that giant box is where all this work happens, and there's a lot of different parts to it. We've been talking a lot about the science of it, but the other part of this is kind of classic design work, which is kind of how do you optimize the experience for employees so that we can do our best work. Here's a few things that we know. Like you keep saying, we're not ever going to go backwards. We're going to go forward into new, probably hybrid work models. So there's going to be a work from home component that's probably always going to be there, and then there's going to be a real world component as well. And I think if we get to, again, step back, make the space to design this in the smartest way possible, we're optimizing it so individuals can do their best work when they need to be alone, and be safe, and whether that's working from home or building a work environment that enables that. So there's that piece. The second part is, how do you enable teams to come together and do great work? And there's absolutely going to be times when you need to get live people together. And many organizations are already thinking about literally redesigning the way offices work. And when you do bring people together, you want to really take advantage of that time. But when you don't need people sitting next to each other, then don't have them sitting next to each other. Because as we'll talk about a little bit later, even if COVID gets completely addressed, let's say by the middle of the summer, there are 0 cases in the United States. Wouldn't that be amazing? But we're still going to have to move forward, prepared for the next pandemic or the next kind of major crisis like this. We're going to need to have, a way of thinking that adapts to these external factors and forces that are going to kind of keep shaping what we do, because we can't. We have to get off of that emergency footing and continue to get back into that proactive planning footing. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more as well. So there's that workplace initiative, design initiative. How do we really optimize for that? How do we bring in these new ideas, social distancing and safety into the workplace? So that's absolutely some of the things we need to do. And then we've learned a lot about tools, and it's absolutely amazing how technology has enabled us to move quickly into this new way of working. But we're really just at the beginning of that. So how do we enable collaboration? And there's another piece of this, which is I'll describe as maximum flexibility as a construct. So as we think about this, we're even beyond whether someone chooses to work from home or just needs to work from home, or occasionally people are together. But there's going to be individual preferences that people have, like how do I do my best work? And it's going to be different for different people. So we're going to have to accept that as sort of a design challenge. And then so that's one piece. Another part is, how do we help team leaders do good work as well now, because they're going to have teams that are, some folks are in the real office on their teams, some are external. It's hybrid, people are coming and going. So how do we understand performance consistently? How do we coach and lead a team with these different factors as well? So there's a lot of unknowns, but we need to engage with this like a designer, and really this is an opportunity to kind of rethink things pretty dramatically.
Yeah, Pat, with that mindset, I mean, it's always, we're technologists at hand, but we're in the human business, right? And one thing we've always talked about is, how do you make sure tools and technology enhances the human and people first initiative and experience? I mean, to me, this is the most complicated and exciting part of this business, right? Is making sure these things are working together.
Yeah, well, I believe we're at a sort of a new inflection point where many of the systems and platforms of the past are about to get fundamentally upended and change, in order to better serve everything we've been talking about. Here's some of the things that I think are important to be thinking about now with that. So one, you and I always talk about whether we're thinking of technology or even just a plan, you need to start with that smallest atomic level. And we always talk about that. Being able to understand behaviors and perceptions as those at the individual level, as they manifest in context, right? So at any given moment for an individual contributor, a leader, a manager, anybody in an organization, what are they doing? What behaviors can we see and understand? And also, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? What's their perception of a situation? And then what's that context that they're in? That's going to be a sort of the new building block of talent management, employee experience design. And then extrapolating from that, then many of the categories that we've had in the past, whether it's employee engagement or leadership development, performance management, Some of those categories are going to be around, but I believe, I know you believe this too, they're going to shift and change quite a bit. So the categories are going to change. And then the way that we can then bring technology in to deliver on the categories and the strategies, if we've done our work now on that kind of atomic level, then that sets us up well to start to kind of adapt toward all the things we're doing. And if we do our work well, Dan, this is that back to that designer piece. We're bringing benefits to the individual. Individuals are having better careers. They're finding better cultures and places they want to work at. And then organizations, as they're working on their talent strategy plans, their people strategy plans, they're going to be able to see, as they're using these new data sources, see how they're working against plan.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And I think this is always going to be a challenge, but it's an opportunity for how we continue to, push people first strategies and push technologies that are useful, helpful, intentional, and focused. So it's exciting.
It is exciting. And, one of the things we barely even got into was another macro trend is, people choosing to leave cities and moving to rural areas. We've all read the reports, something like 70,000 people there's been a net loss of 70,000 people in New York City, net loss of maybe 70 or 80,000 people in the Bay Area or San Francisco. We're seeing a real shift and people are going to different cities. So there's this, again, kind of mega trend going on where workers are going to be much more distributed. So if we're doing the right foundational work right now, it's going to put us in a good place to be able to get smarter with the science, move towards these new categories, and come up with the technology solutions that are going to kind of serve the people strategies in the future. So Dan, we've talked about engagement. We've talked about kind of those trends and how to think about that. We've talked about how the way we're working is changing and how we need to rethink our approach to it. The absolute critical part of thinking about that whole person experience. And again, this is all towards this idea of building unity at work, this idea of feeling really connected. So that's all fine and good, but this is hard work. So if I'm a leader, if I'm an organization HR leader right now, and I'm hearing all these things and I'm excited, but what's the kind of mindset I need to bring to be able to build this space, as Al put it, to do this work and be able to lead my organization forward through this very ambiguous change period in front of us?
Yeah, big question. So I think, what we've been talking about this concept of a constant change mentality, right? This is what's required and this is necessary. And let me explain what we mean by this. And I want to be really clear and state that being prepared and operating with a constant change mindset should not be confused with operating in a state of chaos, right? So in fact, it's the complete opposite. It's learning how to operate with a steady hand with chaos and uncertainty around you, right? So it's learning how to operate with a steady hand while things are shifting left and right around you. A good example is we train and learn martial arts to avoid the fight. I raise my hand, I am not a martial arts expert. I'm using this for an example. But we train to avoid a fight, right? To deter a fight. It gives us confidence and strengthens the mind so we can walk away, right? And so the same holds true for learning and training for a constant change mentality, right? We can stay steady and focused if we're hit, with change all around us. And because everything has changed, this is what we've said over and over again, and what lies ahead, unfortunately, are a lot of unknowns, right? This is exactly the type of mentality that we need to have. And unfortunately, over the past 10 months, we've been seeing stress levels and mental health issues front and center. And it's actually a result because we've been living and operating in a state of uncertainty and chaos, and we weren't prepared for it, right? So we rose up, but we are paying the price now. So what we know and what we've repeated over and over is everything's changed, work has changed, everything needs to be revisited and re-examined. And operating with a constant change mindset, again, actually means you don't change constantly because you're prepared for the turbulence. in your culture is conditioned for the change, so you don't over pivot or overreact. And the models around change agility have always been important. We know this, but now it's necessary for the success of any organization to be prepared for this type of mindset. And this will keep and help to keep organizations grounded and less reactive.
Yeah, I mean, no one does good work when we're in emergency mode, the way you put it. I mean, the incredible thing, and hats off to literally every organization in the world over the last 10 or 11 months now, how we got into that emergency mode and we were able to move through change in order to react to things. But that's not sustainable. But we do need to bring some of that history with us now, like you said, forward, and we need to have better resilience and better skill sets to be able to constantly engage with change, because we're not going back. We just need to say that again. I mean, we strongly believe that the world ahead, whether we're talking about this 2021, even the next 3 to 5 years, we should expect consistent change, and whether it's a health and safety concern, external factors, we're going through probably a pretty significant period of change. But out of this is where great transformational and the greatest companies in the world thrive, the ones that come out of this and the ones that do have the strength, take the time to build the space to be able to do this work.
Change is not a bad thing. And something we've been chatting about a lot too. I mean, the mentality, required and that for this type of mindset and change is really a renewed focus on organizational character, right? And many of you maybe have heard me talking about organizational character before. And to clarify what I mean by this is when we talk about character, right, it's the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. That's how we define character. So let's imagine and live this at the organizational level, right? We define organizational culture, this ultimately defined as it's the values and behaviors that contribute, right, to the unique social and psychological environment of a business. That's one definition. And we've over-rotated on how we measure and define culture. And certainly for a culture that is prepared and ready for this constant change mindset, we haven't been measuring it correctly enough. So we need to focus on more character, right? Because character is human, and humanizing the workplace is necessary. So I would just finally end by saying, what organizations expect from their people and what people expect from their organizations is becoming a two-way street. And it is a revised contract, it's a renewed obligation, and it's a revised unity in work. So actually, Pat, that's a good transition to really a final question I want to bring up. And it's a big question on all of our minds. And it's around polarization. And it's a little personal for us too. So we can all agree that the world is more polarized than it's ever been. And we use a lens and a filter when we communicate with people who we don't know what they believe, what they stand for. And we personally experience this within our own family. And does this mean we don't love them? Of course not. But does this mean we have to find a way to connect and communicate with them as family? Absolutely. I'm not a believer in sort of this cancel ideology that says if I don't agree with you or believe in what you believe, I can't talk to you. That's not going to scale long term. And this is hard. And this is work that's extraordinarily challenging. So, Pat, I guess the question for you, I mean, if we apply this reality that I just walked through to organizational culture or organizational character, what are the short-term, long-term effects that this polarized world society are going to have, and what is it going to have on long-term collaboration and success, and what do leaders need to do to prepare for this and change?
Yeah, a huge question, and this is such an important area of work right now for everybody. And a few things to frame it. We talk about the differences that are polarizing. There's obviously political divides. We just have been through that here in the U.S. very intensely, over the last few weeks. And beyond that, there's just more, I'd say, long-term things. And some of these are probably behind a lot of this political polarization, and that's very different economic experiences for different Americans, and more specifically, different kinds of workers and different kinds of jobs. So at our organizations, we're seeing, for some organizations, hey, we're all pretty homogeneous, and maybe everyone's generally in a similar bucket. This is less of an issue, but there's many organizations where there are different kinds of workers having very different experiences. So what do we do? The first thing is, we all know this basic concept, but it's a clarity of company purpose and vision and values, right? The classic work we need to be doing. But I would challenge every organization to take a fresh look at those things. My guess is that missions and visions for organizations that were relevant a year ago probably aren't relevant, maybe, or as relevant now. And if that mission, vision, and values of an organization is working well, it should feel powerful. It should have a gravitational force. It should be like a North Star that everyone in the organization can get energized by and move toward. And our belief is that if you do that work, that becomes something stronger to kind of push away from the polarization that's happening and these kind of, these sort of external factors. So that's where a lot of the work starts. And this isn't a time to be passive about this. Beyond even your existing set of workers, we believe if you're not taking a bold stand on, whether it's social justice or climate justice, obviously health and safety, this has if you don't have a strong position on this, you're going to continue to polarize your probably existing workforce. You're going to find it harder to attract new workers as the recovery comes in. People are looking for that North Star. They're looking for that strong, gravitational force that holds an organization together. So this is work that's absolutely critical, and people leaders, HR leaders need to be at the table, obviously, with senior leadership to be able to get this work happening and taking a fresh perspective on it.
Yeah, one thing we talk to our clients about this all the time, that now is the time to revisit your values. Typically your purpose hopefully will stay intact, but making sure, like you explained, Pat, that your values resonate with where we are today and where we're going. It's okay to evolve. It's okay to change. It's okay to say, we got this one wrong, but we're going to make a change and we're going to move forward. And that's that humility piece that we talk about. And people and employees will be incredibly inspired by organizations willing to take bold moves and actually make changes to their core values, if it suits the business and if it suits the time and if it makes sense for the organization. Don't change values just because it's politically correct or you feel like it's the right thing to do. Change it because you believe it, you're passionate about it, and it's where you want to head with the organization. So that's, if you take anything away from this today, we absolutely sincerely believe that's an important exercise to go through.
Absolutely. And that does end up leading to what we traditionally think of as culture work as well. And you start to think about how individual behaviors connect with, sort of the cultural constructs that you want. And then that mapping should start to happen more naturally, right? And you're going to get benefit for the individual and in terms of expectations and a sort of a roadmap. And then organizations are going to get more consistency around kind of character that they want to be, that they want to carry into the world. So Dan, we've talked about kind of several different constructs and approaches to this, and in sort of approaching closing out, I see you're popping back on here. So through all this, we're trying to create unity and work, right? This togetherness, right? And so Dan, maybe you can help kind of recap the approaches we've had, and Al, we'd love to get your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah. Before you answer that question, I want to come back to it. But the question that I have, and that it's a theme that ran through the thread here, is that I'm going to use a somewhat cliche or colloquialism. First who, then what? So you said, senior leaders, and I hope you. And so if I'm a HR leader, if I'm an HR business partner, if I'm a people analytics professional, I'm like, okay, I don't have like the keys to the culture of the organization. That is a lot of people. That's a lot of stakeholders. That's getting people aligned. And as we talk about things like employee experience, employee well-being, obviously in response to the pandemic, we were talking about, okay, how do we do remote work? Now we're talking about return to workplace. And so we have formerly, that's kind of this HR project that didn't get much play, to be a little bit of a cynic. But now we have senior leaders saying, how are we going to get work done? So HR is front and center. So is facilities. So is IT. So is legal, because we have things about the way we're working that have legal repercussions as well. So as we talk about forming unity and having initiatives that are going to make a cohesive, effective, safe culture for workers. Can you speak to the how to get, who should be in the room from your perspective? How do you, at what frequency? What do they talk about? Do they talk about, the culture first? Staging those discussions is where I have found many organizations they get stuck. They get stuck in their heads. They don't get to first base just because they don't have a precedent in their experience, or kind of as a leading practice out there on how to systematically put in a unified culture. So I know I said a lot there, so sorry to be my disruptive self, but that's where my head is.
I love the question, Alan, and I think in the last conference it was a similar. You had a similar question around that, because it is so important, right? We can say all these the right words and everyone can nod their head and agree, yeah, we need to do that. But how do we do it? Who does it and how do we do it? So I mean, I think the number one, the purpose needs to be celebrated of any organization. We know that, but I mean, I'm a big believer in double down, triple down on that. Really make sure everyone understands what you stand for, what you stand against, right? And be proud of that. And you need to put it out there. And that really comes from leadership of the company, CEO, right? They need to make bold statements. They need to put it out there. As far as employee experience and how do we really start to live and breathe this change, I'm a big believer in we need to get representation across the entire workforce, whatever type of business you might be in. You got to hear the voice of everybody, because they're going to know what it feels like. Let's pick on hospitality, right? Somebody working the front desk has a completely different experience than someone working back office, has a completely different experience than someone who's delivering room service on the night shift, has a completely different experience who's someone serving liquor to drunk people in the bar after 11 p.m., right? So everyone has an opinion and experience, and I think we need to go out of our way to really listen, understand. Design thinking, right, is an important piece of this. We need to be able to build personas and really understand what makes people tick, what's important to them, and then build strategy around culture that's linked to our purpose and our mission. And as far as the cadence on how often we meet, there's no perfect formula there, but I'm also a big believer in subgroups that are all working together to kind of meet the larger good, and we want them meeting as often as possible. And you bring the larger team together on whether it's a quarterly or monthly basis, but it really depends on the organization, where they're at in their journey, how decentralized the company might be. So that's my quick.
Yeah, and I was just going to add on that a little bit, Dan. Through years of doing this, Al, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's on that whose side. How do we do this work? And we've seen that manifest a couple different ways. I mean, a great senior leader who champions this makes that a whole lot easier, right? There are great leaders out there that make this work easier, and things are probably going to happen more naturally, and that's great. But that's probably more the exception and not the norm. We also see it a lot of organizations. There's someone who's really good at cross-cutting across organizations. They're usually, there's usually only a few of them in like the HR category, but usually you know who that person is. Some organizations have them, some don't. So I would say if you do have that person in your organization, that's a really good place to start with kind of a partnership there, along with trying to get the attention of senior leadership, to be able to do that cross-cutting and start to get that alignment and find those champions. This is going to take time. Or maybe you're that person. Maybe you are that person, or you could become that person. Those kind of change agents that get good at cross-cutting. But it does take that kind of leadership and that kind of capability to be able to get the attention of everyone. Because this either happens sort of ground up, grassroots, somewhere in the middle, or it's a senior leadership or a senior leader that kicks this thing off. But you've got to overcome inertia. So you've got to. Yeah. It's probably one of those two paths.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I don't want to be as we start to wrap up, and I was about to say I don't want to be overly disruptive after having been disruptive. So that's just how I'm rolling.
No, we like it.
as we start to wrap, I want to ask that you two be selfish for a minute and just share what's Radicl all about. How do you serve your customers? What's your core value proposition?
Yeah, so maybe I'll kick it off. So we start with this notion, Al, of this idea that change is possible. And as you can tell, Dan and I come from a lot of experience, and we're really creatives at heart. So we work with organizations to help them with their employee experience strategies. We help them move through the transformative process. Everything we've been talking about today, we're the kind of firm that can come up alongside organizations and help them frame this thing, get it organized. So we bring not only just sort of the consulting ideas to help organizations find a path through change, to find a way to meet the moment, but we're also technologists as well. So we are well networked into the solutioning side of this as well. It can bring kind of best of breed category players. We're really excited about how things are changing right now, and we just launched Radicl about 3 months ago, Dan?
Yeah.
And looking at the community of solution providers, we're building a lot of relationships so that we can bring what we believe are kind of this next generation technology ideas to leave behind something that works.
And you say you're creatives at heart. Do you have any recent examples? I mean, I'm not familiar with either of your accomplishments recently.
So that's right.
You're trying to get us to brag. This was never to be about sort of self-selling.
It's not every day someone does a feature film. Okay, you can talk about it. You have permission. Please.
I'll just say a few things to Dan. You jump in. So Dan and I recently produced a feature film. Tuscaloosa is the name of the film. It came out this year. Speaking of a pandemic and crazy things that happened, our film was released theatrically on March 13th of last year. Literally the day that LA shut down, we were going to be having our premiere on that day. So we were opening in 10 cities that day. So anyway, we had to kind of do a quick pivot to video on demand. But Tuscaloosa is an incredible story set in 1972 Alabama. It's a story that in many ways is an allegory for what we're going through today as we try to understand some pretty big concepts around kind of white privilege, racial inequities, mental health challenges, and then how do we just kind of all grow up and find our purpose in life. And Tuscaloosa is a beautiful film. So it's available on Amazon Prime and a bunch of other platforms as well. Check it out. We're really proud of it. And it's award-winning. We just won... we just keep winning awards for Best Feature. We just played in the Central Florida Film Festival this last weekend, and we won Best Dramatic Feature. We're actually playing in San Francisco Independent Film Festival in a couple of weeks. And yeah, I think we've won Best Feature now in maybe 8 or 10 festivals. So
wow,
it's been a great run. Yeah, it's been really fun.
It's unsurprising. I not only enjoyed it in the moment, it's one of those movies, at least for me, that is sticky. I see images of it. I hear, I remember some of the interactions, and it helps reflect on everything from what white privilege is, at least at that time, and how it reflects in today, and just really how we show up in the world. To your point, coming of age, and so it's really an accomplishment. So kudos to both of you. And the creative element, as I shared earlier with Sanya, who I know you're going to be interviewing in a couple days here. We're artists. We have to be creative. The idea that we're going to pull this leading practice off the shelf and be done with it, just ram that home, is not an appropriate mindset. We're going to have to design solutions that are appropriate for the system that we're responsible for at that point in time, and that takes, to your earlier point, work. It's not easy. It's kind of messy. So, as we start to wrap up, Dan, any closing comments or ideas for listeners?
Yeah, so I'll quickly close, but I just want to also quickly, you asked what Radicl's all about, and kind of to pick up on what you just said, Al. One reason why we launched Radicl was we're working with clients, and our expectation is to continue to work with clients who are ready to make significant change, right? Who are ready to turn things upside down. There is no excuse anymore to say, well, it's too much disruption too quickly. Again, look at what we've gone through in 10 months, what we can do when we work together. So, we felt there was an obligation to step in and work with organizations who are ready to really, really make significant change, really pay attention to their people. We've talked about this people first mentality, for years now, but we have to live it. It's hard work. And this is our purpose and our passion. So to quickly close, I just leave you with 4 very quick points. Number 1, there has to be a focus on mental health and well-being. I think the good news is most organizations we're working with and talking with are aware of that, but don't pretend to be experts there. Get the appropriate help. Make sure you have appropriate mentors set up. We're all going through really tough times, challenging times. So be caring and make sure people are connecting and giving people that space to have that open, honest conversation. Number 2, we talked about this constant change mentality, that we have to create this armor that prepares us for the change that's going to happen. So it doesn't mean we need to keep changing. It allows us to be stable while change is happening around us. And number 3, we've talked about the importance of having a clear company purpose and vision that moves beyond this cultural polarity, something that we can all connect to and respond to, and move away from these trivial differences that we might all have. And then the final one is moving beyond engagement, and we have to focus on the whole person experience and meeting each person where they are and when they're there. So I leave everyone with that. And if we do this right, this allows us to truly bring unity into the workplace.
Oh, extremely well said. Patrick, I'll give you the final word.
Oh man, Dan, it's such a beautiful close there.
It was a beautiful close. I will say this. How about this, Patrick? Just what's your website?
Sure. So we would love we'd love to continue the conversation. Anyone that we'd love to chat with you. So Radicl.work. Radicl is missing an A at the end, so it's RADICL.work. So check us out there. We'd love to have a conversation.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Super
Thanks,
appreciate
Al.
your contribution.
Thanks, Al.
Well, and hope to see you soon. All right.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.